Long ago, there lived an emperor who adored clothing. He spent all his time and treasure on new outfits, caring little for the affairs of his kingdom. One day, two clever swindlers arrived at the palace. They claimed they were master weavers who could create a fabric of extraordinary beauty, but with a magical property. These robes will be invincible to anyone who is stupid or unfit for his position. The emperor, delighted by the thought of such a test of intelligence and loyalty, paid them lavishly to begin work. The weavers set up looms and pretended to weave. Though the looms were empty, curious, the emperor sent officials to inspect their progress. Each visitor saw nothing on the looms, but feared admitting it. If I can't see it, each thought, perhaps I'm unfit for my job. So each one praised the fabric's magnificent colors and patterns. News of the miraculous cloth spread. The emperor, eager to see it himself, went to the workshop. He too saw only empty air, but his pride stopped him from confessing. Instead, he exclaimed how splendid the cloth looked and ordered a grand parade to show off his new garments. On the day of the procession, the swindlers dressed the emperor in the new clothes, pretending to drape him in layers of silk and gold. He walked proudly through the streets while the people cheered, every citizen pretending to see the invincible robes, terrified of seeming foolish. At last, amid the crowd, a small child's voice rang. "But he isn't wearing anything at all." The word spread like wildfire. One person whispered to another until the whole crowd began to murmur the obvious truth. The emperor heard them and knew they were right, but he kept his head high and finished the parade, too proud to admit his humiliation. Have you ever underplayed a more dire scenario as something fleeting, temporal, or inconsequential? Have you ever tried to see the best in a situation or a person when in reality it wasn't there? These examples can be said to be a subtle rejection of reality. Rejecting reality is a psychological phenomenon where a person or group refuses to accept the world as it really is in spite of overwhelming evidence. It can be conscious or unconscious, and it often arises when reality conflicts with a person's desire, beliefs, or ego. The concept of cognitive dissonance shows the process of how this comes about, with cognitive dissonance being the mental discomfort people feel when they hold two contradictory beliefs, values, or attitudes, or when their behavior conflicts with their beliefs. This psychological tension creates a need to resolve the inconsistency, often by changing beliefs, rationalizing actions, or avoiding new information to restore internal harmony and reduce the unpleasant feelings. This shows that the human ego is at the core of our rejection of reality, as the discomfort elicited by the incongruence between actual reality and our preferred reality leads to our rejection of reality. The ego, which is a person's self-concept, understood to be the way a person perceives themselves and would like to be perceived by others, including beliefs, perceptions, and feelings you hold about your own traits, abilities, roles, and values, is at the core of what shapes our perception as human beings. When it is threatened by contradictions, we sometimes reject reality. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, guided by fact and clear thinking. But reality is often inconvenient. It doesn't always match our expectations or our desires or the stories we tell ourselves about how life should be. When the truth feels threatening, we can find ourselves quietly stepping away from it, not always with dramatic gestures, but with small mental moves that protect us from discomfort. Psychologists call these moves defense mechanisms, and they are surprisingly ordinary. One of the most straightforward defenses is denial. This is when we simply refuse to let certain facts in. A loved one dies and we continue to speak of them in the present tense. A medical diagnosis arrives and we insist that the doctors are mistaken. Denial acts like a mental pause button. It gives us breathing space when the full weight of reality would feel unbearable. The problem is that if the pause lasts too long, we stop moving forward at all. Sometimes we don't block reality outright, we reshape it. Rationalization is the art of coming up with reasons that sound logical but serve mainly to protect our feelings. A smoker might say, "I only smoke to relax," or a person who cheats might claim, "Everyone does it." These explanations suit the tension between our actions and our values. They let us keep doing what we do without feeling that something inside doesn't add up. Another quiet maneuver is projection. Instead of admitting to our own anger, jealousy, or insecurity, we place those feelings onto someone else. We accuse them of hostility or dishonesty, qualities we can't yet face in ourselves. Projection allows us to keep our self-image intact, while still expressing the emotions we can't acknowledge. Closely related is minimization. Here we acknowledge a problem, but we shrink it until it seems harmless. It's just a little debt. They only yell when they are stressed. Minimization keeps anxiety at bay, but it also delays action, allowing small problems to grow quietly in the background. Sometimes we don't argue with reality at all. We simply turn away from it. Through escapism, we flood our attention with distractions, endless scrolling, compulsive gaming, substance use, or workaholism. These activities numb the discomfort for a while, but they don't resolve the issues we are avoiding. Reality waits patiently for our return. Our minds also practice confirmation bias, seeking only the information that agrees with what we already believe. We create our news, our conversations, and even our memories to maintain a sense of certainty. But certainty built on selective hearing is fragile. It collapses when the ignored evidence finally breaks through. At times, reality is rejected, not by avoidance, but by invention. Magical thinking makes us believe that thoughts or rituals can override natural laws. A lucky charm, a positive affirmation, a cosmic plan that spares us from chance. Fantasy paints people and situations in ideal colors, the perfect partner who will change, the dream career that will solve every problem. These visions can feel comforting, but they rest on wishes rather than facts. Introjection is the psychological process of unconsciously taking in the thoughts, feelings, attitudes, or values of other people and making them part of your own inner world. Introjection based on self-deception is more prevalent amongst highly narcissistic individuals who take snapshots of people where they might have faltered or exhibited a flaw. Then they create a narrative in their heads of that being the summation of their entire individuality. This introject will be presented to others as the only defining character trait of the individual in question, and sometimes it will be based on made-up flaws or projections of the introjector. But finally, some rejections come wrapped in the guise of philosophy. Extreme relativism or nihilism claims that truth is unknowable or meaningless. It can sound sophisticated, but they can also be a way to sidestep responsibility. If nothing is truly real, nothing needs to be faced. All these mechanisms, denial, rationalization, projection, minimization, escapism, confirmation bias, magical thinking, and philosophical rejection, share a purpose: to protect us from pain, fear, or cognitive dissonance. In small doses, they can be adaptive. A short period of denial after a trauma can give us time to gather strength. But when these strategies harden into habit, they trap us in self-deception, keeping us from the very growth we need. Reality can hurt, but it is also the ground on which healing and freedom stand. Recognizing our defenses isn't about self-criticism. It's about reclaiming the clarity to act, to change, and to build lives that don't depend on illusions. As uncomfortable as it may feel, reality, unfiltered and unsweetened, is where our genuine power begins. On the surface, rejecting reality can look irrational. Why deny the obvious? Why twist facts? Or turn away from what is right in front of us? But from a psychological standpoint, these moves often make sense. They are not random errors in thinking. They are protective strategies designed to manage the tension between what is and what we feel able to cope with. The first and most immediate reason is pain. Reality often carries loss, disappointment, or shame. Accepting it head-on can feel like being crushed by a weight too heavy to bear. Denial, minimization, and fantasy act as cushions. They create a softer version of reality, one that hurts less, at least in the moment. By keeping distressing truths at arm's length, the mind protects our sense of stability. We also reject reality when it threatens our self-image or our core beliefs. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort we feel when our actions and beliefs don't align. If I see myself as a kind person, but catch myself being cruel, the tension is sharp. To resolve it, I might downplay the harm, justify my actions, or shift the blame. In each case, I'm not confronting the truth. I'm reshaping it to preserve the story I want to tell about myself. Linked to dissonance, but even deeper, is the defense of the ego. Our egos are fragile constructions, mental models of who we are, what we stand for, and how we appear to others. When reality threatens that identity, we push back. Admitting to failure might mean accepting that we are not as competent as we imagined. Acknowledging selfishness might clash with our image of ourselves as generous, so instead we reject the fact, and in doing so, we defend our psychological selfhood. Protecting the ego in this way is often less about truth and more about preserving dignity. Uncertainty is one of the hardest conditions for the human mind to tolerate. When reality feels chaotic, our defenses step in to impose order. Magical thinking, superstition, or conspiracy beliefs can all serve this function. They may distort facts, but they restore a sense of control. If I follow this ritual, I'll be safe. If I hold this belief, I know who's in charge. It is less frightening to live in a distorted but predictable world than in a truthful but uncertain one. Sometimes, rejecting reality isn't about protecting ourselves from facts, but from their consequences. Acknowledging that a partner is abusive might mean facing the fear of leaving. Admitting that a community is harmful might risk losing belonging, so we minimize, rationalize, and selectively forget. In these cases, the rejection of reality is tied to the deep human need for attachment and social safety. Facing truth would mean risking isolation. Reality can sometimes feel simply too much. Global crisis, personal responsibility, or past traumas can pile up beyond our capacity to process them. In these situations, rejecting reality functions like a psychological circuit breaker. By denying, distracting, or numbing ourselves, we reduce the load to something bearable. The cost is avoidance, but the short-term gain is survival. Each of these reasons, protecting the self, escaping dissonance, seeking control, preserving relationships, and avoiding overwhelm, shows us something important. Rejecting reality is rarely about stupidity or ignorance. It is about survival. It is a way the mind says, not yet, I can't face this yet. The challenge is that what protects us in the short term can harm us in the long term. Illusions delay healing. Denial prevents action. The world we build on falsehoods is fragile. And eventually, reality knocks louder. Understanding why we reject reality softens the judgment we might cast on ourselves and others. These defenses are not flaws, they are coping strategies, and the very awareness of them gives us a chance to step out of the loop. Facing reality may bring discomfort, but it also brings clarity, and with clarity comes choice. Reality is not always kind, but it is always the place where growth begins. Reality testing is a psychological concept that refers to a person's ability to accurately distinguish between what is happening in their mind and what is happening in the external world. It's essentially our mental fact-checking system. At the heart of rejecting reality lies a quiet but crucial process. This is our mind's built-in system for checking whether what we believe matches what is actually happening. It's the mental skill that allows us to distinguish dream from waking, wish from fact, fear from evidence. But like any system, reality testing isn't perfect, and when it falters, we drift into distortions that can feel safer than the truth. Reality testing is not about rejecting imagination. We all need daydreams, hopes, and creative leaps, but healthy reality testing ensures that we know where imagination ends and fact begins. It keeps us anchored. When this anchor loosens, the temptation to reject reality grows stronger. We begin to privilege the internal world, our fears, our wishes, our defenses over the external evidence in front of us. Imagine a small town built below a great dam. One day, townspeople notice fine lines appearing in the concrete. Some raise concerns, but others dismiss them. They are just surface scratches. Don't overreact. The cracks deepen. Water begins to seep through. But instead of addressing it, the townspeople paint over the marks, telling themselves, if we don't look at it, it isn't really there. For a while, this strategy works. The town continues life as normal. The paint is neat. The dam looks fine, and everyone sleeps more easily, believing that the problem has been solved. But the water has not stopped pressing. The cracks grow beneath the surface. And when the dam finally gives way, the town is swept under by the very truth it had refused to face. Rejecting reality is like painting over the cracks in the dam. It is not stupidity, it is fear. an attempt to protect ourselves from a threat too large to bear. But the danger does not vanish because we deny it. It builds pressure, and the longer it is ignored, the more devastating its eventual return. Facing reality may be painful in the moment, like admitting the cracks exist, gathering the courage to repair them. But it is the only path that keeps the town and ourselves safe in the long run. At first glance, rejecting reality can feel protective. It cushions us from pain, shields the ego, and offers temporary peace. But every illusion carries a cost. The consequences may not appear immediately, but they accumulate, quietly shaping our lives in ways we may not notice until the damage is done. Rejecting reality buys us time, but it is a loan with interest. When we deny illness, delay acknowledging death, or overlook a failing relationship, the problem does not disappear, it grows. The longer we avoid facing it, the more entrenched it becomes, and the harder it is to resolve. Reality, when ignored, tends to return with more weight than when it was first avoided. Our sense of self depends on how accurately we can assess our place in the world. Rejecting reality interferes with this process. If I consistently minimize my mistakes, I prevent myself from growing. If I overinflate my abilities, I set myself up for disappointment. Illusions may protect the ego in the short term, but over time, they hollow it out. Instead of genuine confidence, we are left with fragile pride, constantly threatened by evidence that does not fit the story we tell ourselves. Relationships rely on shared reality. When one person rejects what is happening, denying harm, gaslighting, or refusing accountability, it erodes trust. Partners, friends, or family members find themselves caught between what they know to be true and what the other insists is false. This gap can lead to resentment, confusion, and distance. At its worst, it traps others in illusions too, forcing them to choose between harmony and honesty. When we reject reality, we weaken our own defenses against deception. If we prefer comforting lies over uncomfortable truths, we make ourselves easier targets for those willing to exploit that preference. Propaganda, cults, and abusive dynamics often thrive on this weakness. They offer stories that feel safer than reality, and in accepting them, we hand over our critical thinking. The role of the flying monkey thrives once glaring reality is rejected or minimized, driving us to take malicious actions with made-up justifications from malignant personalities, affirming harmful narratives against targets of blame with no substantive evidence in the bid to protect one's ego. Rejecting reality makes us less free, not more. To deny reality is often to deny feelings too. A person who insists everything is fine when it isn't may appear strong, but inside they are cutting themselves off from their own emotional truth. This disconnection can numb us. We lose access not only to pain but also to joy, because both rely on our ability to fully present with reality as it is. Reality has one persistent quality: it does not go away when ignored. The more we push it aside, the more forcefully it pushes back. The person who denies illness eventually confronts a medical crisis. The society that ignores injustice eventually faces unrest. The child who insists the tide won't come in eventually gets wet. Rejecting reality does not erase consequences. It delays them, and the delay often makes them virulent. The great irony is that rejecting reality feels like self-protection, yet it is ultimately self-sabotage. It narrows our options, erodes our resilience, and isolates us from others. The comfort it offers is fragile, constantly at risk of collapse. Reality, by contrast, can be painful, but it provides solid ground. Facing it may hurt, but it equips us to act, adapt, and grow. Illusion suits, but it leaves us powerless. The consequences of rejecting reality are not always immediate, which is why the temptation persists, but over time, the cost becomes clear. Weakened self-understanding, broken trust, increased vulnerability, emotional numbness, and harsher consequences down the road. Rejecting reality shields us in the short term. Facing reality strengthens us for the long term, and that strength, unlike illusion, is something we can truly rely on.